Good morning, friends. It is day 29 and it's Wednesday, the 29th of April 2020. The title of our little study today, it is Mine to Avenge. Another one of these intriguing stories of David's adventures. And if you want to have a little bit of a summary of certainly chapter 25, anyway, the first part of it, we have this, that Samuel died and David moved to the desert of Maon. There was a wealthy man who was called Nabal, and he had a wife, and his wife was called Abigail. That's where they lived. David decided that he and his men could be self-appointed protectors of his sheep from predators and sheep stealers, something that he personally knew all about. Of course, his men were a wee bit of a loose end at this point, still out and about hiding. But then at a given time, probably whenever they got hungry, David approached Nabal and asked for a bit of a contribution for his assistance. Would you like to feed us here? Would you like to give us something? His men, you see, Nabal's men were shearing sheep, and whenever David asked him to give whatever he could, and Nabal's reply was, well, it amounted to, no way, as we would say over here, no way, take yourself off, who do you think you are? In fact, who are you anyway? Well, Nabal, bravely, I think, given the size of David's following and knowing full well his reputation, refused. So David prepared to fight him. In fact, David was prepared to do more than that to him. But in one sense, he was perfectly correct. Nabal, that is. There was no agreement. There was no understanding. David simply thought that his name was sufficient. Here am I, David. These people will bow down and honour me and give me whatever I want. Reminds us of that old Ulsterism. Do you not know who I am? Nabal is described as very wealthy indeed, and would have had many men working for him given the size of his flock. The Bible describes him as surly and mean in his dealings. We could probably add to that he was greedy, ungenerous and sceptical. Could also say maybe he was a good businessman. But friends, if we're honest, we can all be the same. After 3 years of running the food bank and a month of dealing with council food parcel distribution, you do get your eyes opened. I reckon Nabal got a lot of people knocking at his door looking for something from him. So he didn't care who David was. Didn't matter to him. The answer was still no. Now just let me add a little caveat to that. If a matter needs dealt with in the food bank, well, I deal with it. And I can assure you that it's done with grace and compassion, even if the answer has to be no, which sometimes it is. But David immediately gets angry after a simple no from Nabal. It seems that David has gotten used to getting what he wants because of who he is and what he has done. Too big for his boots. He and his men put on their swords, seemingly with the intention of killing Nabal's men and all of his livestock, the whole shooting gallery of them. And for us in dealing with those around us, anger affects those closest to us. There is a saying that someone has the daggers out for you. And David's men had their swords out for Nabal. The tongue, my friends, is as deadly as any dagger or sword. We can so easily assassinate someone in a single sentence, can't we? I need to be better myself when I don't get my own way. It all depends on what it is, how bad I want something, even whatever time of the day it is. But don't we all need to learn that we can't have everything we want, as David shows us here? We need to react calmly, not overreact, and move on with our lives with grace and mercy. David does act impulsively, believing that he is owed something by a man that he has absolutely no agreement with. Maybe he and his men are starving. That's no reason to go and fight. What can we learn about all of this wealth from Nabal? Well, 4 things on it here. What we have, what you do, what you know, what you are. Nabal was only wealthy in what he had. This was the harvest time for the sheep farmer here, which traditionally was a time of great hospitality towards others. Now, David again would have known that because he looked after his father's sheep. He would have known this tradition. And perhaps this was his motivation. We'll get in on this. We'll do a wee bit of work on here. It's a time for celebration. Sheep shearing was traditionally celebrated by feasting with enough to spare. So here perhaps the farmer simply, a farmer here just simply takes to his bed, doesn't he? Exhausted after all of these things. But over there, it was a time of feasting. But interestingly, the name Nabal means fool. And in ancient Israel, names were often connected with a person's character. You'll see even in chapter 25 that Abigail even knows the name and the meaning of her husband's name and refers to it that he is a fool. He was of the house of Caleb, which also means dog. Now, that's not a compliment, having that as your name. Nabal meaning fool and coming from a family which means dog. In the background to it as well, a commentator I was reading this morning on here has noted this, that only Rachel and Esther in the Bible are described with the same Hebrew name as the one here that describes Abigail as beautiful. Now, I think that's interesting. It seems that Nabal's wife Abigail was beautiful on the outside and on the inside. And there are many women like that, married to men who care about the outside only and not about the inside at all. And we need to pray for such women. My mother waited 30 years for my dad to get saved. And she prayed every night that it would happen. Are you like that? But verse 25 of chapter 25 tells us that Abigail visited David, probably clandestinely, begging for forgiveness and her husband's life, as a good wife should, despite his reputation, and gave David a gift. She certainly knew of David's reputation and right to the throne of Israel. She knew all about that. She was prepared to see the bigger picture, the God-painted picture of what would eventually happen. David, however, believed because he had protected Nabal's sheep of his own accord that Nabal loaned him compensation. How often do we do this? Presumption and arrogance, friends, aren't they? A deadly mixture in the heart, especially when the outlet is from our mouths. Didn't James say that the tongue is worse than any sword? What do we learn as we finish by David's overreaction in this whole thing here? What do we learn from it? This is not a high moment for David in any way at all. It's not at all. He doesn't respond the way God would have him respond to an insult. We are supposed to bear insults with love and kindness, returning their evil with our good. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. Isn't that what Matthew 5 tells us, friends? And this is striking, since we just saw in the previous chapter, in the previous study, how David responds to Saul. Saul being the king, of course. David was able to be kind to King Saul. But it seems to have been harder to do it towards someone he perceives as his equal, or maybe even lower than him, in the case of Nabal. And often this is a true measure of our character. Not how we treat our superiors, but how we treat our equals, or those we deem as beneath us. Of course, we should never do that, friends. But those we treat as our equals, or those beneath us, in some way or another. The Lord give us grace in all of our dealings with people. And the Lord bless you real good this day.